Do you find that your characters have sort of a theme that runs like from project to project? Do you find that your protagonists are always sort of kind of representing one thing, and like is there a running no?
No.
None of that. All right. So
I'll give you an example.
All right.
Woody's World, which we produced here. The through line of that whole project is the character of Woody, kind of a fish out of water, stranger in a strange land, and what Woody encounters and what everybody else encounters in dealing with him is something that is sometimes difficult to discuss. You know, the issues of racism, of elitism, of kind of an informal caste system that we have in today's culture. So, yes, I could have taken someone from a minority or a different country or whatever, but in this case, he's a wooden spoon. Nobody has ever dealt with a humanized wooden spoon. So it's humorous, but, there are issues at hand. The other element of the Woody's World story is that he's a chef, and he wants to introduce things that everybody can appreciate and enjoy. That's that. In the screenplay Late Train, I started writing that from one character's perspective, and as the stories developed, it became someone else's story. So, it was, this amalgamation of personalities. So it's different than what you're suggesting in that the protagonists all carry a similar theme.
Gotcha.
I'm not a heroic writer.
You wear a lot of hats as a storyteller, producer, director, writer, and you have acting experience. Do any of those hats fit better than the others?
I think I'm most comfortable as a director because a director's job is very much like the conductor of an orchestra. Mm-hmm. And, if you've only played one instrument, if you've only been a woodwind player in an orchestra, you may not appreciate what the other instruments do. And this is totally untrue because if you've studied music, then you develop that appreciation. But for the sake of conversation, if you've only been a carpenter, mm-hmm. and you've never worked with electric or structural engineering, then it would be difficult as an architect, although you may have some great ideas. But having worked as a carpenter, as an electrician, having done some structural engineering, writing, it's not easier, but I'm comfortable, again, in communicating with those different tasks. And again, as a director, mm-hmm. people ask you if you want coffee. If you work in the crew, you have to get your own. So it's great.
All right, become a director. I like that.
If you like coffee. Yeah.
Well, I can get something else. I like scotch. So you interned for Alfred Hitchcock.
I did.
And this is going to be kind of a loaded question, but what would you say you took away from that experience that has most affected you? If you took several things away, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I'll tell you, there are a couple of things. What we would do is every week or so, all the interns, and I wasn't the only one, would sit around the conference room, and the lead director on his staff, a man named Gordon Hessler, or at times Hitch himself would come in, and we'd have a question and answer during lunch. And at one point in time, somebody asked, there was a discussion about why certain things happen in a film, and in this case we were discussing Rear Window, and why a door opened a certain way, because it just didn't seem to be something expected
right.
in what was going on. And the discussion went on and on and on, and finally Alfred Hitchcock said that the reason the door opens that way is that the carpenters built it that way. And it didn't seem worth the time to rebuild it. So it was very pragmatic. Does this advance the story, and will it make that big a difference in advancing the story to have the door open left to right or right to left?
Wow.
So for dissecting all the brilliance and genius and all that, sometimes things are just practical.
Right.
And, you know, I think that unless the story doesn't tell itself, people get too carried away with the analysis of it. Another thing that I learned is, and this was, my job was cataloging storyboards for all of his films, and which I found out was something that someone every year does. So they mix them up and then you do it again.
Oh, wow.
But I asked a question and it went around to this discussion. And at the end of, and I was, you know, I was a film student, so I had all the answers and no solutions, but I had all the answers. And at the end of it, Alfred Hitchcock very brilliantly said, "This is the entertainment business. When you cease to be entertained, you have no business being here."
I really like that.
Well, so at the time I thought it was just, you know, not suitable for broadcast. But as I've grown older and I've appreciated more and more of this, I realized that our job is to communicate an idea. We are not solving the world's problems. And if we are, we're a very small part of that solution. You know, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not, you know, a physicist. I'm not a politician. You know, I tell stories in a visual medium. And that's it. And hopefully they get people to think. My responsibility, though, on the business side is to protect the investor, and that the story is being communicated correctly to meet their expectations and to protect their investment. Otherwise, they won't be there the next time around.
Right.
So this really is a business. And one of my frustrations in that what I did not learn when I was at film school, what I did not learn until I was actually in the real world, is the business of filmmaking. And that it's more than, here's a budget, here's what it should cost, here's what it does cost.
Right.
There's a lot more to that. It's how to sell it and who's your audience.
Right.
And to understand that it's, to make a movie or a TV show is, you know, you're building a product for a multinational exposure. And they don't teach that at school unless you're in a business program.
Right.
So I know that's a long answer to your question.
No, that's a beautiful answer, actually. Cinema being a business, do you kind of feel that on some level that sort of kills your creativity, or sort of kind of diminishes maybe the magic of working in cinema or working in a creative field?
Not at all. If this were a hobby, then I wouldn't care.
Right.
But to me, it's a business. And I've been in the business now 40 years, over 40 years. And I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to work in only this business. I've not had to go someplace else to support my hobby.
Right. You're doing better than Orson Welles.
Well, they wouldn't hire me to sell wine. But yeah, so I don't feel that. I think it's an element. You know, what are your hobbies?
This.
No, this is your career right now.
What's that?
Well, this is a career right now.
Essentially, my hobbies are watching movies, dissecting characters,
Okay.
I love to write. That's
Do
my
you know
hobby.
anyone who's a musician or a photographer?
I know a few photographers.
Okay. So as a photographer, they can shoot whatever they want. But there are, parameters within which they can shoot. They can't, without spending, ridiculous amounts of money for waterproof casings, they can't take the camera into a bathtub.
Right.
They can't take it under a lake. And there are ways of doing it, but with the tools that are available to them as photographers, this is part of their responsibility. So does that limit their creativity, or does it give them a framework within which to create? And that may not be the best analogy, but that's my feeling, is that, again, I have a responsibility. If I want to tell my story to just you and to Joe and to a couple of friends around a beer,
Right.
that's one thing. Then I just have to come up with the price of beer. But if I'm doing something that costs hundreds of thousands and, in fact, millions of dollars, that's part of the equation.
That makes sense.
And the better I understand that equation, the better I'm able to not see these things as obstacles.
It's quite profound.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
I mean, you need obstacles to tell a story. Any story.
That's true.
Whether it's a love song or a poem, or to tell the story of building a building, or to tell, a thriller, a comedy. Every single story needs an obstacle. In building a building, the obstacle is gravity. If you want that building to stand, you'd better have an appreciation of gravity.
Right.
And of the financial obstacle, if you will.
Right.
If you want to tell a love story, what's the obstacle?
That's great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love looking at things differently. That's interesting.
I mean, boy meets girl, girl falls in love with boy, boy falls in love with girl, they're happily ever after. Not much story there until there's an obstacle.
Right.
How did he meet the girl?
Right. What have you learned in your 40 years that you wish you'd known when you started your career?
To be better at networking. I think my advice to anyone in any medium is to start with what's in your heart, what you know. It doesn't mean that, if you're writing a story about, Oedipus Rex, you have to go through all that.
Right.
So you have to find a way of making that a personal story to tell without experiencing it.
Right.
But easier things to do are to tell from what you know. If you've ever been or thought you were in love and it didn't work out, there's a story.
It's interesting.
So, and I think to trust your instincts. Very often, again, we analyze things to pieces.
I know I do.
And we overlook the obvious.
Right.
I have a friend who's a doctor, and in a patient coming into the room, she said, as an intern, people look for the zebra in the herd of elephants, or the herd of horses, I guess. And the job is to not find the zebra. The zebra will show up if there is one. But to start looking at all the horses and then start determining what the problem is from that. So I think the overanalysis of things gets in the way.
That's interesting, because that's something I personally do, so it's an interesting perspective. And then...
Can I say one more thing?
I would love if you would, please do.
I know we're running out of time. In analyzing things, it's great intellectually, but when you're telling the story, when you're pursuing things, don't overanalyze. First, go with your gut instinct, your gut reaction to it. The time for analysis is when it comes to telling the story and bringing it to the screen, whichever screen it may be. Then you have to determine, how many cameras do I need? How much of a crew do I need? What do I need for catering? How many vehicles do I need? What kind of permits do I need? What will it cost for the insurance? All these different elements come into the construction of a movie or a television show or a concert. All these things are essential, but I don't think that a songwriter sits down and worries about catering, or they wonder which hotel they'll be staying at. They want to tell their story, and they don't overanalyze their feelings.
Honest to God, if cigarettes didn't cause emphysema, I would totally smoke, because I'm just in love with it. Rod Serling did it too. And do you ever watch Mad Men?
I have watched Mad Men. I'm
in love with I don't know how people hold their, I don't know. It's for some reason, just for me, it distinguishes like depth and intelligence. And if it weren't, well, that too, but if it weren't cancerous, I would smoke in a heartbeat, honest to God.
See, I watched Mad Men and I noticed Christina Hendricks.
Oh, God. Love that woman. Especially, I looked her up online, and she's apparently she's got depth far and above and beyond what I would have imagined.
Her bra?
Far and above, yeah. Her looks match her intellect and her depth, and just such an attractive woman. Wow.
Yeah, I think she's great. She was in a film with Katherine Heigl, that Katherine Heigl executive produced.
Really?
Where she and this guy are the godparents of the kid, and Christina Hendricks and this other guy are the parents, and they die. And the film was just out. It was cute, very predictable. But man, she'd be hard to light. Well, first of all,
I feel like she'd be quite easy to light.
Well, there's a lot of her to light, but redheads are not easy to light.
Really?
Really. Because, I mean, do color balance for film.
Right.
You color balance them depending on the color of the background, the facial complexion with other people. It has to all be done in a generalized lighting pattern, or when they do a key on her,
right,
there are lighting issues to address, as well as the architecture.
That's fascinating. I knew I loved redheads. I just didn't know why.
Go up to a redhead and say, "I love you. You're so hard to light, but I love you anyway."
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.